Chapter 17. Most of us recover after we have been bereaved. Time really does put experience into perspective, and we will work our way through grief, loss, bereavement in our own way and at our own pace. Because life is not perfect, our grief will be supported by some and hindered by others. In the days after Steve died, a lady told me that at least my partner had died. Her husband had divorced her, which was much worse because she had to see him still living in the same village. Another lady drove all the way down from London to spend the day here with me to show support and concern. Despite preparation for difficult life events, we do not know how we will react when they happen. The bustle of post-death, pre-funeral arrangements provides purpose, and being busy is very helpful. The funeral is our symbolic act of farewell, the final physical goodbye. The body is still present in a coffin or in a shroud, and then taken away forever, either into the ground or into the crematorium. After the funeral is over, after everyone has gone home, that is when the rest of life begins for all of us who are left living. Until we are dead, we are very much alive. Even if we are approaching death and feel that we simply cannot go on, we are alive until we are not. We cannot be a bit dead and a bit alive. We are either one or the other, and though life may be so hard that we long to end it, until it does end, we are still alive. And for the people left behind, the bereaved, the pain of loss can make us feel that we too will die. Witnessing this grief in others can be deeply worrying. We feel so powerless. We do not know what to do. What can we do? What should we do? But life, that strange force that holds us all until we die, does not stop, and time will still pass. This is hard to accept if we are in absolute grief. It seems inconceivable when we are in such darkness that people still go about their business. Shops open and close, newspapers still print, and nothing stops to mark the passing of the person who has died. I found that the first loss of Steve was the most traumatic. I had to face the realization that death is real. Facing my mother's death, Dominic's death, and Alan's death was easier because I had accepted that death comes to everyone. I did not fight it and fear it, but I dreaded the loss. The loss, the bereavement and the grief after each death was impossible to plan for. I could not and did not know how I would cope or how I would feel. I knew it would be hard, and the process of coming to terms with their deaths would take time. And I knew I would have to surrender to the experience, but each time I was thrown into a different darkness, a different experience of loss, and each time I had no real idea what to do. We can plan for loss in our heads, but I have found that my head does not have a say in the end. My heart, my feelings, my emotions lead me, and much of the time after a bereavement, my head has no idea what to make of any of it at all. It took my mother's dear friend 4 years to begin to grieve for her mother and brother. They died many years ago now, within months of each other, and as a mother of 4 little children at the time, my mother's friend was busy and felt very little. It was when she went on to a religious weekend retreat 4 years later that the floodgates opened, and to everyone's astonishment, she was overwhelmed with passionate grief. Her usual spiritual counsellor had been called away, and feeling very grumpy about having to have a replacement spiritual director at short notice, she began her session with him. They were meditating and praying on the Passion of Christ at the Last Supper, at which Jesus knew that soon he would be taken away and crucified. Through prayer, she was imagining the distress and fear at this powerful final meal with his 12 disciples, one of whom, Judas, would betray him to the soldiers. When she became aware that her brother was a part of her experience of the Passion, he was one of the 12 disciples. She was overtaken with anguish and broke down in tears. The Passion then included her mother, and she said that she spent the whole weekend retreat in such a powerful despair that everyone became worried about her. By the time the retreat was over, my mother's friend was able to cope again. When she apologized for not focusing on the theme of the retreat, the Passion of Christ, her spiritual director told her that she did not need to study it. She had lived it. "He was wonderful," she said. "He was just what I needed. I had no idea that I had kept all of this grief locked inside for so long." It is possible, too, that we can identify so much with our grief and suffering that it becomes who we are. We are our experience. What has happened to us feels so traumatic, so awful, that we cannot get past it. We become angry, confrontational, depressed, irrational, and we cannot make sense of our loss, and we cannot find a way to get beyond it. It is impossible to accept, and we may feel guilty because it should not have happened in the way that it did, or at all, and we take responsibility for failing to save that situation, whatever it was. Or we may feel so angry at the loss, so helpless and fearful of what it means for us, that we cannot and do not cope. And this does not go away. It is not resolved. And we become this grief, this reaction, and it informs everything we do, think, and say. There was a man who lost some family members and friends that he loved, one after the other. He could not get over it, and we spoke over the telephone because he did not want to leave his house. More than that, he did not want to see anyone at all. He developed strange illnesses. He became housebound, and no doctor could diagnose exactly what was wrong with him. Then he lost his job. I had known this man before his losses as a tough, strong character, full of humour and fun. He enjoyed his work, had a lively social life, and was happily married. Now, he would not see anyone. He put on weight. He became very ill with undiagnosable conditions, and he could not reconcile the loss of his family and friends at all. But he wrote about it. He wrote long, angry messages on social media, full of furious incomprehension at all he was suffering. Then he decided his wife did not need him, and he publicly asked her to go. "I release you," he wrote, "and I will no longer be a burden to you. You will find someone else, and I won't hold it against you." By that time, everyone felt very sorry for his wife. He was a burden, he said, and he was setting her free. Years passed. His wife did not go, and the long, angry messages still posted on social media. This man became so identified with his distress that he became comfortable with it. It was who he was. He was the man who had lost some relatives and friends and was in the depths of despair. In his messages, he complained about everything and everyone. People fell away from supporting him because there was no point. He was, it seemed, addicted to being angry, bereaved, and upset. The story never changed. It did not move on. It did not develop. It stayed the same at almost the same intensity as at the start of this story of loss. Only by this time, everyone was deeply bored by it all. After about 3 years, this man seemed to find a way through his isolation. he began writing more positive messages online about people other than himself, and he was nicer about them too. Whatever had happened with the deaths this man had witnessed, they had precipitated a total shutdown in his mind and body, and had tested everyone around him for a long time. The illnesses he developed all focused around pain, in his limbs, his bones, his joints, and from time to time there were broken bones. It seemed his body was expressing his distress. For much of the time he took medication that made him feel worse, but it seemed to fit with what was happening in his heart. He was feeling so distressed, lost, angry, horrified and frightened that everything about him seemed to mirror it. All of us hold unresolved emotions and stresses in our bodies, and our minds can cause real physical symptoms because of it. Tension headaches, heavy limbs and exhaustion from depression and grief, shock and anxiety manifesting in stomach problems, or the sensation of a broken heart from loss and despair. I was made aware of this connection between emotions and the body in the months following Alan's death. It all came to a head in France, on the top floor of a little holiday cottage. 2 kind ladies wrote to me after Alan's death, offering me their holiday cottage in France in the village next to theirs. I went. It was a generous, thoughtful offer, and I would be looked after by them from the next village, with time to be alone and do as I pleased. While staying at Alan's house, my painful joints had become very bad. It was harder to get up from a chair, to walk very far, to get out of bed. It had been creeping up on me since my mother had died, and was becoming worse and worse. I took it in my stride. I did not want to go to a doctor. I did not want to leave my own bubble of self-imposed isolation. I did not want to talk to anyone about it. My body continued to ache and stiffen. I noticed it, but I did not care. I wondered if I too was getting cancer and was going to die. I still did not care. The little house in the south of France was absolutely perfect. My friends collected me from the airport and deposited me at the pretty little door, with the promise to collect me for the next day for a meal in their house. On the ground floor was the kitchen and courtyard. Steep stairs led upstairs to the bathroom, and a little sitting area behind some shuttered windows. Up some more steep stairs was the bedroom. Slowly I made my way around the house, but my painful body was making my progress slow, and though the sun was shining and the fresh fruits and vegetables were displayed in lovely colourful bowls downstairs in the kitchen to cheer me up, I could not get up and down the stairs easily. My legs hurt. My hips would not move properly, and my shoulders and arms were constantly painful. I felt as if I was seizing up. That night, having got myself slowly up the stairs and finally into bed, the pain in my whole body was too much. I started to cry. I was stuck at the top of a tiny house in France and could not move. I could not even get out of the bed. It was supposed to be a holiday. I was far from home in another country and had no idea what to do. From the eaves of this beautiful little house, I called Cousin Maddie. Maddie is a physiotherapist specialising in pain management. I told her I was dying and that I had seized up and that the pain in my whole body was worse than it had ever been. Maddie was lovely, as always, and suggested that I was suffering from a grief reaction. "You are holding all your pain in your body," she said. "Your body is holding all your loss." Had I ever heard of DIMS and SIMS? Maddie asked me. She explained the idea of danger in me, DIMS, and safety in me, SIMS, developed by a sports physiotherapist, Lorimer Mosley, and his colleague David Butler. Maddie explained to me that pain is made worse by things that create fear, by memories associated with past trauma and bad experience, by lack of understanding of what is actually going on in the body, by all things that feel threatening and hopeless. These are the dangers in the danger in me. The pain we suffer is made better by understanding what is happening to cause the pain, and by being well informed, by being supported with kindness and love, and by removing pressures and fears from the pain experience. This is the safety in me. It made sense. My feelings of hopelessness and defeat on seeing all the stairs in the little house had made me frightened and anxious. I was anticipating huge problems with getting around it, and I felt alone and ashamed of feeling so disabled. My disconnection to what was causing the pain and my lack of interest in myself did not help either. With Maddie's help, I realized that my pain was not constant. When collected from the airport by my friends and taken to a shop full of colourful and wonderful fruit, vegetables and fresh breads and cheeses, I did not remember finding it difficult to get into and out of the car. When anticipating something lovely, like reading a book I want to read, or thinking about walking in the sunshine in France, I am less aware of the pain. These, she said, are my dangers and my safeties. Find your safeties, Maddie said, and look out for your dangers. There is a brilliant lecture on YouTube by David Butler, she said. Please log on and watch it. Where is your laptop? She asked, and I replied that it was on a table on the other side of the room. I could just see it from where I was sitting, seized up and in pain from my bed. I think you should see this lecture, Maddie said, and talked me through some of the links she has found between ill health and emotional pain. I began to feel better, and Maddie once again suggested I listen to what David Butler says in the YouTube lecture. After a while, I told her I was logged on and ready to find it. Did you just leave your bed? Maddie asked, laughing, and I realised that I had. I had left my bed without thinking, picked up my laptop and returned to sit down and find David Butler giving his talk. Our bodies can hold a great deal of pain for us, mirroring the pain in our hearts, minds and souls. I looked at myself a bit more closely, and I saw how I was not helping myself, how unaware I was of what was happening in me, and how being disconnected and not caring had resulted in my body shutting down. The pain did not disappear, but I understood it more and paid more attention to ways of supporting and comforting myself more mindfully. Eventually, the pain did go, and I do not remember when it did so, only that sometimes I am reminded of how bad it felt in those dark days. My body still reacts to stress and difficulty through pain in my limbs and my joints. But I am more aware now that it may be telling me that I need to stop, to look at what is happening to and around me. It is a danger signal, a warning sign that things are not quite right. It made me feel a great deal more compassionate to the man who became his grief and had tried to dismiss his wife as an act of noble kindness. Except that she did not go. She is no pushover, and they are very happy again now.